last week we brought you the news that Israel had assassinated Yahya Sinwar. That, of course, an extraordinary development. He was the leader of Hamas, especially after the assassination previously of Ismail Haniyeh, who had been the head of the political branch of Hamas. He also was the architect, in large part, of October 7th. So incredibly significant developments there. In the wake of that news, MSNBC, shockingly, one of my old friends, Ayman Moyaldeen there, brought on our friend, Dropsite co-founder Jeremy Scahill, to talk about the significance of these events. And he really called out MSNBC on their own airwaves. Let's take a listen to that.
I just want to begin by saying that as we're speaking tonight, the Israelis are waging an extermination campaign in the north of Gaza. For the past 2 weeks, they've surrounded the area, and they've intensified it after the killing of Yahya Sinwar. No food or medicine of any kind has reached most parts of the north. I'm in direct touch. I'm in with medical officials in the north and with journalistic colleagues. I understand that at least 80 people have been killed tonight in a horrifying set of attacks on half a dozen residential buildings. I've just gotten done seeing images from the ground where children are being shredded like meat in a butcher shop. I don't understand how any of us, whether we're journalists or not, this isn't about objectivity, how any of us can watch this genocide unfold in real time and watch the pontificating of the politicians running for president and not just cry out, this has to stop. I mean, this has to stop. We've looked at this. I mean, I know you've reported on the ground from Gaza. I mean, we're watching a genocide in real time. And I'm sorry, but on this network also, there are people who have promoted propaganda from Israel. There are people cheerleading for those running for office who are lying to the American people about concern for the Palestinians. And yes, we should talk about Yahya Sinwar. But Yahya Sinwar is also in many ways the story of Gaza. You know, yes, this was a violent man, but his violence was rooted in the fact that he was born in a refugee camp. And Israel, throughout his entire life, waged a war of annihilation against the Palestinians. I'm not here to defend Yahya Sinwar. I'm here to say that we can't talk about who Yahya Sinwar was or what Hamas is without talking about 76 years of colonialism, of apartheid, of mass killing, of mowing the lawn, of controlling the calories.
No lies detected there. Let me just say, Ayman is such a real one for bringing Jeremy on.
He's gonna get in trouble for that one.
Yeah, and Jeremy, I'm quite sure that's the last time we're gonna see Jeremy on MSNBC's airwaves for quite a while. Yeah. You know, he used to be, and if you guys go and listen to the interview that Ryan and Emily did with Jeremy, he used to be a fixture on MSNBC. Yes. Rachel Maddow had him on all the time. Back in the era when it was the Bush era, and you know they were all aligned and going after George W. Bush and you know exposing torture and all the abuses of that era. They loved to have him on. And then the moment that it was the Obama era and Jeremy was still doing his thing and say, hey, he's increased the drone war, like pointing out the failures there. Suddenly that was it. He was axed, and he's never heard from Rachel Maddow since, because he did, I think, something similar of calling out MSNBC on her program. And she expressed to him in real time, like, you can't do that. This is a problem. And then that was it for his. So I don't know if this was his first return to MSNBC since that era, which would have been, quite a while ago. But I, again, don't expect we'll see him back there for another maybe 2 decades.
It's so stupid. Yeah, exactly. I mean, his story, like he told with, I mean, Ryan too. Ryan was an MSNBC contributor. You guys were on there. And then, at a certain point, they made a decision. They're like, this is the direction we're going. And obviously, look, it has worked, right? They are the #2 cable news network. Yes, they have the oldest audience in all of cable news, 72 years old, boomer, white liberals. These are mostly people who love the network. But for them, like, this is genuinely shocking to see something like this. Anybody who watches our show, or frankly who's even on the internet, you could be a pro-Israel person on the internet and you would still not be shocked by something Jeremy has to say. But the thing is that on that network and him calling them out directly on their face, I do think it has some power, to hear it stated that way. Because it's so foreign. It's such a foreign even way of thinking.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's why Ta-Nehisi Coates and his book and his interview rounds have been so significant too, is that, that perspective is just mostly, almost completely absent from elite media airwaves, whether it's MSNBC, New York Times, CNN, Fox News, et cetera. So anyway, it was quite striking to see that perspective offered there, I really suspect Eamon will get in trouble for having Jeremy on, because he already has been under quite a bit of fire. Remember, after October 7th, they took him off the air for a while. Obviously, Mehdi got fired for probably for his approach to that conflict, and especially the aggressive way that he would question people about the conflict is probably specifically what got him canned, possibly by the ADL people who are very influential there. So we'll keep an eye on that. At the same time, I referenced earlier that Israel, for some reason, decided to actually put out the video of Yahya Sinwar's final moments. We can put this up on the screen so we can take a look at some of this. You know, this was after he had already been part of a battle with a tank. And the IDF did not find him. You can see him sitting in that chair, and it looks like his arm is, you know, like potentially severed.
Yeah, the photo did show it's severed.
Yeah, it appears to look like it's partially severed. So he's basically has one arm. He uses that one arm. You'll see here in a moment. This is a drone that's surveilling him. He uses that one arm to throw a stick at the drone camera. And so, you know, this video kind of dispelled some of the Israeli mythology about him. You know, they had portrayed him really as like a rat hiding in tunnels. They also portrayed themselves as knowing exactly where he was located and saying he was surrounded by hostages in some underground bunker. And here he is actually, you know, fighting to the bitter end, throwing a stick at the drone that's sent in to assassinate him. And, you know, I think that part, Saagar, I'm interested for your reaction here. You know, part is the Israelis, for their domestic audience, just seeing him finished and in this, you know, in this state where he's surrounded by rubble and all the level of devastation, like for an Israeli domestic audience, this plays well. And I think that's probably Bibi Netanyahu's primary concern.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
But in terms of the global impression, and even especially among Palestinians, many of whom, according to polls, had really turned on Sinwar.
Yeah, because they blame him.
Because they blame him in part for, you know, I think they blame Israel too, but they're like, you brought this upon us. And they bought into this idea that you're, you know, living this more luxurious life and you're hiding while we're being bombed. This has increased a large amount of sympathy for him within the Palestinian population and bestowed on him a sort of like valor that Israeli propaganda had effectively robbed him of previously.
Yeah, I'm just struck by the difference between the U.S. and between Israel here. Let's put this up on the screen. This is from the Wall Street Journal. It says, in death, Hamas leader may have won wider support than when he was alive. And there's just so many differences if you look at the way that the U.S. operated against Osama bin Laden. For example, there's a photo allegedly of bin Laden's face like split in half like a pancake or something, that when he was shot by those Navy SEALs and SEAL Team 6. And that was never released to the public. They made great effort to make sure that he could never be seen as a martyr or to give ISIS, which was big at that time, any propaganda, or Al-Qaeda. And they buried his body at sea, you know, to make sure that there was never any grave that people could flock to. It was just a very different reaction. And I mean, what I would point out is people celebrated. I was there at the White House the night that bin Laden was killed. It was one of the craziest, honestly, moments of my life. Just remembering what that was like, you know, for the country and for everything. It's not like people didn't celebrate and Obama didn't get the political bump that he needed, I guess, you know, if we're going to talk in crass terms. But there was also a lot of thought about, hey, if we're going to do this, then we shouldn't release video. We should make sure that this doesn't become like a major thing in the Arab world, or for people who are radical Islamists to be able to flock around. And this was like the opposite reaction that Israel decided to pursue. You know, I would say too, even with I believe the Baghdadi video was never released, you know, by Trump. So it's not like Trump, I mean, obviously a very different person than Obama in the way that he thought about things. But even he never did that, you know, whenever Baghdadi was killed. So that's just the major difference in the way that our countries look at these things. And I think probably because we have more experience with a 20-year GWAT, you know, blowback campaign of what happened when we did try to have all these celebratory actions during the Iraq War, and we found out hard in 2005 and 2006 what that looks like.
I think there's also just such a gulf, massive gulf between how the Israeli domestic audience consumes these things versus how the global audience consumes these things. You know, when you look at the polling and you have, you know, the preponderance of opinion saying we weren't tough enough in Gaza and we haven't, you know, been brutal enough in Gaza. That's why we from the beginning had this question of like, why aren't they taking the phones of the IDF soldiers so they can stop recording their war crimes, you know? And The answer is because they actually, from a domestic political standpoint, they liked the recording of the death, destruction, extermination, war crimes. They liked it. Those soldiers that were posting these things became like, heroes who were feted at these various, let's resettle Gaza conferences. So the victory that's on offer to the Israeli people is one of utter annihilation. And so the more that those images of annihilation are shown to the Israeli domestic audience, the better Bibi does in the polls, and the more he's able to hold on to power, because that is the real victory that he is promising them. So I think that's part of why. I saw some people theorizing that maybe the IDF hates Bibi, and so they leaked this to undermine what he'd been saying, but I don't buy that. I think this is to feed the Israeli domestic audience, who loves to see him there in the rubble in his final moments. And, the Wall Street Journal, again, to cite a very mainstream publication here and their analysis, they interviewed a number of individuals. One Gazan said that once they saw the footage, it changed his mind about Sinwar. He said it showed he was fighting until the very end. Another analyst said it makes a difference to people in the Arab world that he was above ground, that he didn't escape, that he was fighting. How and where he died also refutes the Israeli narrative of Sinwar abandoning the people of Gaza. Many people feel Israel can't pretend this is a big achievement because his killing wasn't planned or done through using intelligence. So, I think it's pretty revelatory, their decision to release this video and what it says about Bibi's mindset and Israeli societies. At the same time, there was, let's put this up on the screen. Apparently, Bibi's own house came under attack. Israel's government said that a Hezbollah drone, targeted Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's house on Saturday. There were no casualties. But, an attempted assassination here on Bibi Netanyahu. Certainly, Israel's military said dozens of projectiles were launched from Lebanon. Day after Hezbollah announced a new phase in fighting, Netanyahu's office said the drone targeted his house in the Mediterranean coastal town of, I don't know how to say this, Caesarea, maybe?
Let's go with that.
Yeah. Neither he nor his wife was there. It wasn't clear if the house was hit. And, of course, we know from the military censors they will not allow you to report whether the house was hit or not. That's something they're very sensitive about, showing any damage from attacks from Iran or from Hezbollah. We can also put this up on the screen, Israel taking a significant hit in terms of one of their top IDF commanders. This is Colonel Hassan Daksa. It says Lieutenant Colonel, but it was actually a full Colonel. Hassan Daksa, commander of Israel's 401st Brigade, killed today in what this individual describes as a precise ambush by Palestinian fighters in Jabalia. This colonel, very significant, Saagar, because he was really in charge of that assault on Jabalia refugee camp. So that's why it's quite noteworty that he was killed by Hamas or other aligned fighters there.
Well, also a little bit of a preview. What does it look like? That's you've got the army, they come in, refugee camp, he was killed by an IED. So they're learning exactly the same problems that the U.S. forces learned in Iraq. Some of the initial reporting said that some of the IED was actually assembled with unexploded ordnance that Israel had dropped on Gaza, which, again, same thing that people learned in Afghanistan. That is a classic play out of Afghanistan and Iraq. You can ask anybody who served over there. These things are very deadly, and the more that they operate there, and in Lebanon against Hezbollah, much more competent, enemy, which has already proven the ability to strike at them effectively, even hit Bibi's house. I mean, already they have accomplished more, better tactics against the IDF and their ability to penetrate Israeli defenses than anybody in Hamas ever could have dreamed of, in the war. I'm just talking about, post-October 7th. So clearly they've got a big problem ahead of them, and the Israelis are really getting a taste of what this looks like.
Yeah, and finally, we don't want to lose sight of the continued assault on Gaza. This is one of the deadliest strikes that we've had in quite a while. Let's put this up on the screen. At least 80 people killed in Israeli missile strikes on a school compound in Gaza City. 6,000 displaced people were sheltering there. It was hit as they prepared for the morning prayers. Reportedly, once again, caused a fire. Video from the scene, according to The Guardian, showed horrific loss of life with body parts, rubble, and destroyed furniture scattered across blood-soaked mattresses. So, here we are, obviously more than a year after October 7th. And yes, Hamas is able to, to kill this colonel who was quite significant. So they have not been defeated. I don't think they're probably anywhere close. I've always thought that it's probably not really possible to thoroughly defeat Hamas, but Israel right back in Gaza City, northern Gaza, and, you know, continuing this campaign of devastation and annihilation, also telling people once again to relocate, but in some instances shooting them as they try to flee, floating this idea of starving the population. There was a PR ploy effectively last week where the U.S. seemed to pressure Israel to let some aid into northern Gaza. None had come in since the beginning of October. There was a photo op with 50 aid trucks, but all of the reports on the ground suggested that none of that actually went to northern Gaza. So that's where we are.
Yep. All right, we got Ken Klippenstein standing by. Let's get to it.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.